Hello guys, welcome to my new video, and today we're looking at restoration shamans, and this is a video guide that's gonna be covering resto shamans mainly in raid situations but also in Mythic. Plus we'll look at everything. We'll look at talents, we'll look at their essences, we'll look at the Azerite, we'll look at some of the corrupted gear, we'll look at the gameplay in raids and 5-mans. And again, if you're looking to play resto shaman, it's a great patch to play shaman because they're one of the essential raid healers in the raid situations. Again, in Mythic Plus the perception is not that great, but we're gonna change that. The utility king is back, and let's look at the talent setup for raid situations first. Probably going to be your basic default setup for nearly majority of fights in ny'alotha. You'll have Unleashed Life, which probably is going to be used on cooldown, and we'll talk about that in the gameplay section later down the video. Echoes of the Element is very strong in raid situations because you'll get to use double Cloudburst, and double Cloudburst is pretty much the go-to. You'll have Spirit Wolf. It doesn't really matter in tier 45. Depending on what you need as a guild. At tier 60, Earth and Wall Totem is really good. The Absorb, especially because ny'alotha is so stacked, can account for a lot of your healing. Ancestral Protection Totem will be used in, let's say, Mythic progression fights where you feel there is a very high chance of someone dying, because if you do end up equipping it and if you do end up using it, a person who dies in the range of Ancestral Protection Totem will be able to use that free battle res. And on top of that, you also get a big bump in the raid's HP as well. So it does have a lot of uses, but Earth and Wall Totem majority of the times will be used, especially if you're not running that Mythic progression or you're not sure where someone's definitely gonna die. Tier 75, again, Graceful Spirit is the best HPS throughput talent here because it gives you the ability to use Spirit Walker's Grace as more often. And Spirit Walker's Grace, again, Shaman is somewhat immobile, and healing on the go with Spirit Walker's Grace is really good, especially with Graceful Spirit, which reduces its cooldown. But a lot of the times, the guilds will need Windrush Totem, which, because ny'alotha's boss fights or boss rooms are so big, and sometimes people have to go from A to B, Windrush Totem is definitely one of the biggest utility tools the Resto Shaman can provide. So ask your guild, do you need Windrush Totem? If they don't, go with Graceful Spirit. Is going to do a lot of, healing on the move. We talked about tier 90, Cloudburst is pretty much a go-to for majority of the time, and High Tide is pretty much a go-to for majority of the time in raid situations as well, because we'll talk about this in the gameplay section, but Resto Shaman's spell priority is mainly reliant on this one spell, Chain Heal. So let's look at Mythic Plus talents. They don't change too much depending on what you need. In tier 15, Undulation, Unleash Life are probably the most popular picks. I prefer Unleash Life because it is healing on demand. You know exactly when you're going to get it, and it's gonna buff your next direct heal by 35%. While Undulation, every third healing wave or healing surge heals for an additional 50%. It can be somewhat unreliant, but both of them are quite popular picks. I tend to go with Unleash Life for this time being. In tier 30, there is some discussion here. A lot of people go with Echoes of the Elements because it gives you 2 charges, not of Cloudburst, but 2 charges. It does give you Cloudburst 2 charges, but it gives you 2 charges of Lava Burst. And Lava Burst is an essential DPS tool for Mythic Plus Resto Shaman because of Igneous Potential trait, and we'll talk about that later on. You can get away with Deluge, because it has been changed, and all of a sudden, if you have a Riptide or if people stand in your healing rain, your healing surge, your healing wave, or your chain heal are going to heal for 20% more. So a lot of the times, if you lack that single target healing, for example, you can put Riptide on a tank and your healing surge is going to heal for a lot more. Or if people are staying in your healing rain, your AoE is going to be a lot stronger. So this is considered to be the pure healing talent build with Deluge, but not a lot of people go with it because they prefer the Echoes of the Element and 2 Lava Bursts, because you as a healer need to provide DPS because that's the meta in BfA right now. So choose which one you're gonna use based on an affix. That's what I tend to do a lot of the times. Tier 45 is gonna depend. Tier 60, a lot of people will go with Earth and Wall Totem. You can get away with Ancestral Protection Totem as well, but it can be hard to use. Tier 75, a lot of people go with Graceful Spirit. Tier 90, Cloudburst is probably the most popular choice, but some people do tend to go with Flash Floods. When you consume Tidal Waves, the cast time of your next heal is reduced by 20%. I feel it has a big flaw. So all of a sudden, if you do consume your Tidal Waves, which are generated by Riptide or Chain Heal, your heal is going to be faster. But it does not reduce global cooldown. So for example, if your healing surge all of a sudden is 0.9 second cast time, but your global cooldown is 1.2 seconds, then that means you're gonna have this awkward casting rotation. After you cast healing surge, you still have to wait a couple of milliseconds before you can cast anything else. I'm a bit more of a fan of Cloudburst but I've seen people using flash floats, but I do recommend Cloudburst for a lot of the Resto Shamans doing that Mythic Plus content. And in tier 100, High Tide is very popular choice, even in Mythic Plus content. I've seen people using Ascendance if they know there's going to be some real burst healing needed every 3 minutes, or if they have a good organized group and they won't waste Ascendance. But a lot of the times people will go with High Tide because they're pugging and they want that constant AoE healing. So that is some of the default choices for Resto Shaman in Mythic Plus content in terms of talents. Now let's look at essence choices for Resto Shaman in raid situations, and that is very, very important. The essence choices for raids in Mythic Plus is severely different. So first of all, this is probably the most default choice of Resto Shaman in raids. Vision of Perfection Major, which is going to have a chance of proccing your Healing Tide. Because of ny'alotha's raid damage profiles, there is a lot of rot damage or constant AoE damage happening, meaning that Healing Tide procs, they probably won't go to waste. And a lot of the times, Healing Tide is probably going to be one of your top heals in any of the ny'alotha boss fights because of Vision of Perfection. It has been buffed in 8.3, the proc rate has been increased, and this is literally the #1 go-to choice for a lot of the Resto Shamans. Because of this, because you're not going Memory of Lucid Dream, which was the #1 choice in Eternal Palace, it gave you a lot of mana. Shamans will have mana issues because chain healing is going to cost a lot of mana. So you'll see things like ERT being used. And besides that, you see Conflict and Strife and Unwavering Word, which is one of the new essences. A lot of times it is used because of the Absorb. It also reduces your corruption. So if you have that like 45 corruption or something, Unwavering Word will bring it down to 35. 39 is usually the breakpoint where people stop stacking corruption, because after that you start getting a little bit iffy in terms of survivability. If you don't have Conflict and Strife, a lot of people will use Memory of Lucid Dream Minor. So now you will have 2 mana essences to help you with those mana issues. Now if you look at the Resto Shaman in Mythic Plus, it's going to be a lot different, and that is to do with the single target healing. So first of all, as a major, you'll have Vitality Conjurant. Now Vitality Conjurant, there's a lot of misconceptions about how it works. Now it shows up on healing meters, people have been using it in raids, and Mythic Plus, I see why people would use it. It transfers a lot of HP from other people who are full HP to a person that's lowest. It doesn't really generate any HP, it doesn't generate any HPS, it just transfers it. So if you use this in raids, you might see it doing like 15% of your healing, but if you look at Warcraft logs will actually remove most of the transfer and leave only the absorb effect of it. So it's misleadingly good in raids, but in Mythic Plus, a lot of people, including priests, will use this because it doesn't matter if your whole party, let's say everyone but the tank is 100% HP and your tank is about to die. Using Vitality Conjurant Major on the tank will transfer the HP of all the other members into that one person. Doesn't matter if it's not generating any HPS, because you're helping the tank, and especially on necrotic weeks, it also ignores the necrotic healing effect as well. At least it did the last couple of weeks. So Vitality Conjurant is probably the #1 choice if you need that tank healing, and as Resto Shaman, you probably will in Mythic Plus content. Outside of that, you have again, Conflict of Strife is used by a lot of people. You won't have Unwavering Word, you'll be used another new essence, and that is Spirit of Preservation, which is going to make your healing surge heal for additional times. So, not only you have Vitality Conjurant to help your tank, but you also have more powerful healing surges because of Spirit Preservation. Your tank healing is magnified. Your strength or your weakness as Resto Shaman, which is single target healing, is being reduced by these essences. So now you can feel very comfortable with that tank healing because you're using Vitality Conjurant Major and Spirit of Preservation. And then you most likely will probably still use that Ever-Rising Tide because you're getting that intellect buff, you're getting that mana if you're using or doing a lot of high tyrannical keys, which could last a long time, and mana could be an issue. And this is probably your default choice as the Resto Shaman going into Mythic Plus content. So let's go look at Resto Shaman Azerite gear in raid situations. And there is not a lot of things to say besides the fact that Heart of Darkness is just great right now. A lot of people will be using it. You need to keep above 25 corruption, so make sure you're above 25 in order to get the use out of Heart of Darkness. And besides that, as Resto Shaman, you'll probably want to maintain 1 trait of Healing Rain or Overflowing Shores and 1 trait of Spouting Spirits in order to make your Spirit Link and Healing Rain bigger in radius. So more people can make use of it, especially if they're kind of outside of it. You want to keep at least 1 of these traits. It's gonna help your raid a lot. Spouting Spirits is a little bit more different because after you place your Spirit Link, it will heal the people who need healing afterwards. But generally speaking, you can get a good efficiency out of Spouting Spirits. Overflowing Shores is great. Again, you want to have those for the radius increase on those spells. Heart of Darkness is an easy pick. In terms of Azerites for Mythic Plus for Restoration Shaman, it is very different. And I haven't configured my gear to suit Mythic Plus because it's a lot of reforging. First of all, you'll want to get as many Igneous Potential traits because Resto Shaman single target DPS can be insane with this. And as a healer, you need to provide DPS. Igneous Potential is really strong. So you want to get as many of these, and you'll probably want to pick up as many of Turn of the Tide. Now, Turn of the Tide in raid situations is not that great because you're just chain healing most of the time. But in Mythic Plus, single target. Both of the bonuses of Tidal Waves are increased by 5%. This does not stack. If you have triple Turn of the Tide, it's not going to increase it to 15%, it's still going to be 5%. But the spells affected by it heal for an additional fixed number, this stacks. So a lot of Resto Shamans will stack Turn of the Tide, so their healing surge would heal for a heck a lot more. And on top of that, you will have those Vitality Conjurant Major and probably Spirit of Preservation Minor, so your healing surge is legitimately insanely strong because of this. So a lot of the times people will stack Turn of the Tide in Mythic Plus content, and they'll stack Igneous Potential for that DPS gain. Now, if you look at the stat priority for Resto Shamans in raid situations, the general consensus is something like this: Critical Strike, Versatility, relatively equal, but they'll probably be at the top. Critical Strike, Versatility, Haste, and Mastery. Now, all of these stats can actually be very good for Resto Shaman in raids. The only reason people, myself including, would rank them in that order because Haste and Mastery change. Haste can be very good because, hey, you can cast your spells more often, but at the same time, more spells equals more mana usage. So if you are running into mana issues, Haste becomes less desirable. To an extent, Mastery is somewhat similar because you're going to be healing more the people who are low HP with Mastery. But the fact is, what if you're bringing or overhealing content? What if there are too many healers and no one's taking any damage? If you're doing normal content, there's not a lot of healing needed anyways, and Mastery is going to dip a lot lower. But what if all of a sudden you start playing your Resto Shaman in Mythic content and you want to underheal a boss because you need extra DPS? Mastery, a lot of people are going to dip lower and your heals are going to be insanely strong. So this is the reason why a lot of people will say Crit and Verse are the best. They're consistently good. Nothing's going to change. Doesn't matter if you have 5, 6, 7 healers, Crit and Versatility are still going to give you a decent increase to your healing. So that's why Haste and Mastery are regarded lower, because they're dependent on outside factors. Now in Mythic Plus, it's a lot more difficult because there's going to be certain assumptions that are going to be taken. First of all, I'm going to assume that you want to deal DPS as Resto Shaman, and that means you're going to be running Igneous Potential build. For Igneous Potential, the stat priority is a lot different because Haste and Versatility are regarded as one of the best stats because you'll be using Flame Shock into Lava Burst. Lava Burst will crit 100% if the person has Flame Shock on them, so all of a sudden crit is a bit lower. And with Haste, you'll be able to cast more Lava Bursts. So that's one assumption. I'm also assuming you want to have stats that will help you with healing as well. You don't want to go all DPS, so this is why I say for Mythic Plus it's going to be something like Crit, Verse, and Haste. Relatively equal in everything in terms of what you want to get out of the Mythic Plus dungeon as a Resto Shaman. Maybe Haste is a little bit lower than Crit Verse, but it's definitely more optimal in Mythic Plus content because guess what? You won't have as many mana issues in Mythic Plus content because you are able to drink after each trash bag pull. You're able to use that sugar crusted fish feast that is going to give you tons of mana back if you sit down. Now, high tyrannical bosses, mana will be an issue and Haste will probably drop down a little bit, but the general consensus in my eyes, Crit, Verse, and Haste are very good stats to use if you want to heal and DPS. Now, Mastery, just like every other healer, is a decent stat or a very good stat in Mythic Plus content for healing. But for DPS, it's giving you 0. It won't give you bigger Lava Burst crits or anything like that, but it will help you with healing members of the party who are dipping very low. But again, I'm assuming you want to do a decent amount of DPS, and that's why I rank these stats in this way. A lot of it is field crafting. I'd love to hear your opinions about what stat build you're running, but if you want to deal a decent amount of DPS, you'll probably want to stay away from Mastery in Mythic Plus at this given point. So if you look at the generic gameplay for Resto Shaman in raid situations, it's relatively easy. There is a spell priority on what you need to do. For example, Healing Rain, you should just use it on cooldown and probably use it at melee or clumped up range. It heals 6 targets, it has been buffed so many times. It's just generic healing that you get. If you're using Overflowing Shores as well, it's gonna have an initial heal on top of it. Keep in mind that none of the Azerite traits are affected or gonna go into the Cloudburst, and I'll talk about it later on. But generally speaking, Healing Rain, you'll have things like Unleashed Life as a talent for raid situation, and that is going to buff the next shaman's direct heal by 35%. And it's very important to know how to use it. Use it on cooldown. A lot of people tend to hold on to it far too long. Use it on cooldown. If people need AoE healing, use it on Chain Heal. If people don't need AoE healing and there's only 1 or 2 people, use it on Riptide and put it on a tank or something who has constant damage happening to him or her. And that is generally what majority of Resto Shamans will do. Unleash Life on cooldown. If you need AoE, Chain Heal. If you need single target, Riptide. If you need real priority single target, you can use it on things like Healing Surge. Making sure that you already have tidal waves available can be even better. For example, you can use Unleash Life, you have tidal waves and Healing Surge, and that is gonna heal for some juicy amount. But that's if you absolutely need that spot healing. Majority of the time, Chain Heal or Riptide, and that's what the Shamans are gonna do. And again, you have Riptides, you will have double Riptides. Riptide has been buffed. Try to keep it on people that need healing, or a lot of the times ny'alotha fights are going to be stacked. A lot of the times ny'alotha fights will have continuous AoE damage happening. So spreading out your Riptides is going to generate tidal waves, and Chain Heal is also going to generate tidal waves, which is going to increase your healing from your Healing Surge or make your healing way faster, which is the exact same. It's the exact same concept from Holy Paladin's Infusion of Light. With Flash of Light and Holy Light, you will be ignoring most of the tidal waves in raid situations because you will be using Chain Heal as your main direct source of healing. So now I need to cover another big thing, and that is Cloudburst Totem. It is a very interesting concept because all of your healing, and that includes overhealing, are going to go into Cloudburst, at least 30% of that healing. So even if people don't need healing and you are healing them, portion of that healing is going to be stored up by Cloudburst, and it's going to be released after a couple of seconds. Now, you can pop it early if you want to. If you know, for example, that, hey, everyone's going to be topped up in the next 1 second, and my Cloudburst still has 10 or 5 seconds left, but I already have a decent amount of healing stored on them, you can press it again, and it's going to explode, and it's going to heal people equally divided among them. So, generally speaking, if you're a new Resto Shaman, this is your spell priority or something along those lines. You want to make sure things are down already and you're ready to heal. Again, Overflowing Shores do not go into Cloudburst. There used to be a time in EP or Eternal Palace where Spouting Spirits with Ascendance, you could cheese it and everything will go into Cloudburst and you'll heal for like millions in like 15 seconds. And that is gone. That no longer is abusable or usable. So generally speaking, you'll have your spells ready, you'll have your Healing Rain on cooldown, you'll have your Unleash Life, and let's say you have Cloudburst running. And then your next Chain Heal is going to heal for loads, and that portion of that healing is going to go into Cloudburst. And hopefully you're going to get your High Tide proc, which means your next 2 Chain Heals are going to heal for even more. You can have a weak aura for this, and this, hopefully you'll get to time this buff with your Cloudburst as well. So you can see right now, I have Cloudburst active, I have High Tide active, I'm going to pop Unleash Life, I'm going to pop my Racials, and I'm just going to spam Chain Heal. And this healing is going to heal the people, and part of that healing is going to store up into Cloudburst, and Cloudburst is going to explode and give me free healing. So this is the most optimal way of aligning debuffs or aligning buffs in order to get the maximum Cloudburst usage. If you're a new Resto Shaman going into ny'alotha raid, you'll probably be using your Cloudburst on cooldown because you're not sure what's going on, and a lot of the times continuous damage, it probably won't go to waste. But you start noticing that on Rathian, when people have to run out, and when the debuff is gonna expire, people are gonna take a ton of damage. So maybe you wanna pop your Cloudburst a little bit earlier, heal up a couple of people, and when they run out and they come back in, Cloudburst is gonna pop. Maybe you're doing Shatar Mythic and you notice that the person that is being chased by the blob, once the blob reaches them, there's raid-wide AoE. So maybe you wanna pop your Cloudburst a little bit earlier, store up some of the healing, and when the blob reaches them, AoE happens, Cloudburst happens as well and heals them up. And all of a sudden you start picking up, you can go all day about how you can optimize Cloudburst, but generally speaking, just using it on cooldown is gonna net you good results. And once you're doing that fight more and more often, you start noticing what your Cloudburst is overhealing and how you can optimize it. So the general consensus is Healing Rain on cooldown, using Riptide as much as you can. If you have Unleash Life and you need AoE healing, make sure Cloudburst is down and you can pop some juicy Chain Heals happening there. A lot of your healing is going to be Chain Heals. You're going to be spamming Chain Heals so much. And this is the reason why you have a decent amount of, you know, mana essences, and this is why I recommend trinkets like Mod for. I actually recommend at least one mana trinket for Resto Shaman, because that will allow you to spam chain heal more, and that is really, really important, because chain heal is going to be your bread and butter. Besides that, if you need to heal on the move, you have Spirit Walker's Grace, which can be very good. Try to time it when you need to move. Make sure your Cloud Burst is down, make sure your Healing Rain is down, make sure you're using your Riptides on people, make sure you're always using Unleash Life on cooldown. If there are people stacked up, use your Earthen Wall Totem, which can be very, very strong if people are stacked up. For example, Mod second phase, where there is a lot of healing needed and everyone's stacked up. Absorption is going to be insane here. Using your Healing Tide is also going to be very strong, because Healing Tide cooldown has been reduced, because you will be using Vision of Perfection. For me, it's 2.3 minutes, so you can tell your raid leader that, hey, Healing Tide is no longer 3 minutes. I can use it more often. And Spirit Link, I mentioned this before. With Spouting Spirits, you need to be very careful about how to use it. You want to make sure that your Spouting Spirits are going to heal people, but you also want to make sure that the damage reduction is going to be applied to everyone before the damage comes in. So timing it is going to be very, very important, and you can get some good use for your Spouting Spirits. So this is the general consensus of how to play Resto Shaman in raid situations. It's relatively simple. Chain heal is the king. You will be ignoring majority of your tidal waves, just like Holy Paladin ignores a Fusion of Light procs as a Glimmer of Light Paladin. Resto Shaman will be ignoring majority of your tidal waves, because they'll be spamming chain heal over and over again and making sure that Cloudburst gets as much healing as it can. In terms of corruption, there's a lot of effects that can be really good for Resto Shaman, and one of the best ones has to be Flash of Insight, and the only way guaranteed to get this is from Jestagar, and it drops a weapon. So basically your spells have a chance to grant flashes of insight. You gain between 1 and 8% of intellect at all times, and this is one of the best corruption effects for a lot of healers. Again, I didn't mention this for Holy Paladins, because Holy Paladins don't care about intellect, but generally speaking, this is really good. In terms of other corruption effects, Leech is good for every healer out there. If you can get that, it's gonna give you some constant throughput to yourself and survivability as well as stat increases, or flat stat increases are great. You also have these procs, stat procs, which also can be very good. The crit on Deadly Momentum was very weak, but it has been buffed a lot, and now it's a very decent choice as well. So for Resto Shaman, if you need that crit, again, I mentioned Deadly Momentum was pretty weak, but it did receive a buff in the same way that Void Ritual got a massive buff, and all of a sudden Void Ritual is a very, very good choice, especially if you have a couple of more people using Void Ritual in a raid, which is very, very likely. And these are all amazing choices. Flash of Insight, Void Ritual, Leech, stat percentage increase, and stat procs are all gonna be very good, both in raids and Mythic Plus. So I know this is another long video. Thank you guys for watching this guide. I'd love to hear some of your tips and tricks about ny'alotha, about Mythic Plus, because especially Mythic Plus, because a lot of it is somewhat field crafting at this point. But generally speaking, Resto Shamans are in a really good position right now, especially in raids. They're one of the most, or at least they have climbed so much, and a lot of the world first kills included Resto Shaman. ny'alotha is stacked up. Your Healing Rain, your Chain Heal are going to be annihilating. So much pump healing right now. Guys, thank you for watching this guide. Let me know how you feel about this, and I'll see you in my next video.